Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aysha, and thank you so much for joining us today for the online Minerals to Metals Forum hosted by the Southern African Institute for Mining and Metallurgy. During the discussion, please do type your questions in the Q&A section in the toolbox at the bottom of your screen. After the presentations, we will have a Q&A session to answer these questions. You may at that point raise your hand and speak to the panelist directly. Please note that this forum is recorded and will be made available to the public. You can remain anonymous by changing your name and leaving your questions in the Q&A section. If you have any issues or would like to be added to the mailing list, please send me a private message in the chat. So the following session, we will investigate the transformation seen in the South African mining sector, focusing both on the past, present, and potential future shifts in the regulatory approach to address historical injustices. What are the past and current approaches to transformation within the mining sector, and what do we hope to see in the future? Today we have Ntsiki Adonisi-Kgame with us, and she will provide an overview of the MPRDA, the mining charter, and other legal tools used to address historical injustices in the mining sector. And we will address the question, is this progress or are we seeing politics as usual? Ntsiki is an executive at ENSAfrica's Natural Resources. She's an admitted attorney, notary public, and conveyancer of the High Court of South Africa. She has a holistic perspective on mining matters due to her former position as a general counsellor for a leading mining group, where she was responsible for the group's entire legal function. She specializes in all aspects of mining law and acts for a range of mining companies in all mineral commodity sectors. This includes base and precious metals, coal, rare earths, sand, and diamond sectors. Ntsiki's experience covers a broad range of areas, including mergers and acquisitions, conducting mining due diligences, execution and registration of mining titles, advising on integrity, security of tenure, and variation of mining titles, and structuring, drafting, negotiating, and reviewing various types of agreements, from project inception to execution. She has experience in disputes in the mining sector, including judicial review of administrative decisions. She also advises regarding aspects of mineral royalties, environmental aspects of mining law, and stakeholder aspects of the mining sector. Ntsiki's experience further includes all aspects of regulatory work in the mining industry for listed and unlisted senior, mid-tier, and junior companies. Ntsiki has authored and co-authored several topics within the mining law. Sorry, I think I've just read that really quickly and stumbled over all my words, so I'm going to just start that again. Ntsiki has authored and co-authored several topical mining law articles in various publications. Without further ado, I would like to invite you, Ntsiki, to turn on your video and present on the topic for today, which is transformation in the mining sector, progress or politics as usual. Thanks, Ntsiki.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you, we just can't see you.
It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Camilla, would you be able to?
Okay, there we go. Perfect.
Okay, there we go.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for having me on your platform. I hope to have a discussion, so I'll go through my slides fairly quickly, and then we can have a discussion on several topics that will be covered today. Okay, so we are talking transformation in the mining sector, progress or politics as usual. Just to give you an overview, we will be looking at the foundation for empowerment, the legislative instruments, the nature and applicability of instruments, mining sectors, mining charters rather, We'll look at the challenges and the progress made to transform the mining industry. So as we know, the Foundation for Empowerment derives from the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. And the primary legislation governing the mining industry is the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Act, which we will just look at a few objects of the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Act, which I'll refer to as the MPRDA. We'll also briefly just look at the purpose of the broad-based Black economic empowerment. So the Constitution in its preamble says it wants to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. We know we come from the legacy of apartheid, and all legislation has to be aligned with the Constitution. And the MPRDA is one of those statutes that have to align with the Constitution as well. So the objects of the MPRDA, I'll just deal with section 2D and 2F. It says substantially and meaningfully expand opportunities for historical disadvantaged persons, including women and communities, to enter into and actively participate in the mineral and petroleum industries and to benefit from the exploitation of the nation's mineral and petroleum, and to promote employment and advance the social and economic welfare of all South Africans. So as we know, the mining industry, Black people were not able to participate. And in 2004, when the MPRDA came into force, these are the changes that the government wanted to change. So the legislative instruments giving effect to the MPRDA include the broad-based socio-economic charter for the minerals and mining sector of South Africa. I'll refer to it as Mining Charter, the codes of good practice, and housing and living conditions. So the empowering provision that gives the minister the power to establish the mining charter is this section 100 of the MPRDA. So the minister, as you can see there, it says the minister must within 5 years from the date on which the MPRDA took effect, and after consultation with the Minister for Housing, develop a housing and living conditions standard, develop a code of good practice, and to develop within 6 months a broad-based socio-economic empowerment charter that will set the framework for targets and timetable for effecting the entry into the active participation of HDSAs, which are the historically disadvantaged South Africans. So if we look at the BE Act, Section 12 deals with transformation charters. And the minister must publish in the Gazette for general information and promote a transformation charter for a particular sector. And the particular sector for the mining industry is the mining charter. And the purpose of the BE Act includes promoting economic transformation in order to enable meaningful participation of Black people in the economy. So if we look at the MPRDA, Regulation 41 that deals with the social and labor, so just to explain, when mining companies apply for mining rights, one of the requirements is that they need to submit a social and labor plan, which once it's approved, forms part of the terms and conditions of the mining right. And in the social and labor plan, you will have what we call local economic programs and human resources development programs for both employees and the community within which you mine. So the objectives of the social and labor plan are to promote employment and advance the social economic welfare of all South Africans, contribute to the transformation of their mining industry, and ensure that holders of mining rights contribute towards the socio-economic development of the areas in which they're operating. So the nature of the instruments, mining charter, codes of good practice, housing, living conditions, we would say they are subordinate legislation, because you have the MPRDA as the act, you have the regulations, which would be deemed as the secondary legislation, but the primary legislation would be the actual act. So, and I mean, we'll come to it, you know, whether these mining charters, is it law, is it a policy, is it a guideline, what is it? So the applicability of instruments. So the mining charter. So if you look at the MPRDA, for a mining company to have a prospecting right, the minister may, having regard to the type of mineral consent, extend and the extent of the proposed prospecting project, request for the applicant to have empowerment. And for mining rights, before you're granted a mining right, the minister must grant the mining right if the applicant is provided for the prescribed social and labor plan, and if that granting will also promote the objects of the act, which is to objects of empowerment. So when, I'm sure we've all heard about this Chamber of Mines litigation, and in there, it held that once the DMRE, so that once the regulator has satisfied that the grant of a mining right will further transformation objectives of the MPRDA, the holder is not legally obliged to restore the percentage of the ownership controlled by the HDSA to 26% as required by the original mining charter or the 2010 mining charter. And I'll come back to the different mining charters. And that's where we had this concept of once empowered, always empowered. And let's just move on here. Okay, so you had the original mining charter, the 2004 charter. Then we had the 2010 review charter. And I'm only going to deal with the 2018 charter and not necessarily the 2017 charter. In the industry, it's known as the Musebenzi Zwane charter, which didn't take off. So if we just look at the ownership elements of the charters moving from 2004, 2010 to 2018, in 2004, mining companies were required to have 15% within 5 years, 15% of Black ownership, and 26% within 10 years. And the ownership would be 50+1 controlled companies or 25+1. And the broad-based ownership included mining unit trusts and ESOPs. And in the 2010 charter, they then included that the B entity must have a minimum 25+1 vote of share capital directly owned by HDSAs and meaningful economic participation, which means that there must be equity, there must be trickle dividends, and the empowerment partners must have voting rights. And the elements would include the workers, the communities, and the BE entrepreneurs. 8 years later, in 2018, then the charter now recognizes the continuing consequences of prior transactions for the duration of the mining rights. And the recognition does not apply to when you want to renew your mining rights or when you want to transfer it from one party to the other. And the other thing that changed is that the empowerment profile for new entrants is that the empowerment structure must be 20% B entrepreneurs, of which 5% is preferably to women, and 5% to workers, and 5% to the community. So the mining charter was published on the 27th of September 2018. And it has said to be developed in terms of the section 100 of the MPRDA, which I said is the empowering provision, which then gives the minister power to develop a charter. And as you would have heard in the media as well, that these charters were not law because the minister was only authorized to develop one charter as in accordance with section 100. And I mean, recently the regulator came out to say that they will not appeal this once empowered, always empowered concept. So I think at least we are settled, and the mining industry is very happy with that. So the implementation guidelines were also gazetted on the 19th of December 2018 to be read with the 2018 mining charter. So just to look at, I won't go through the entire thing, but just to give you flavor, 2004 mining charter, 2010 and 2018, just looking at the key definitions, you will note that the structure, so they've kept the 50+1 or 25+1 shareholding by historically disadvantaged South Africans. But if you look at the 2018, we've moved on now to say a B compliant company must have a minimum of B level 4 status in terms of the BE codes. And this will be the BE Act that I referred to earlier. And a minimum of 25% plus 1 vote ownership by HDSAs. And the B entrepreneur is still an HDSA and is at least owned by 51% is owned by HDSAs, excluding host communities and qualifying employers. And it must also have the voting rights. And the difference really in these charters is that now we have women-owned and controlled companies, and they've also made provision for the youth. Okay, I'm going to, so mining charter, so for existing mining right holders, you still have to have your 26% shareholding, which will be recognized for the duration of your mining right. And if anyone exited prior to the commencement of the charter, the right will also be recognized as compliant for the duration of the mining right. But this recognition will not be applicable when you renew your mining rights. And the recognition of continuing consequences includes all the historical transactions, whether they were, at holding company level or mining right level, or it was used as units of production, shares or assets, including all BE transactions, which formed the basis upon which the new order mining rights were granted. And I think the industry is now happy, except for those two elements that on renewal or transfer, they don't want to now top up to 30%, which is the requirement of the 2018 mining charter. And that's the paragraph 2114, where it says the recognition of continuing consequences shall not be transferable and shall lapse upon transfer of such mining rights. So we've dealt with this. The other issue with this is that the mining charter requirements are not aligned with the MPRDA itself. And as I said before, primary legislation, so secondary legislation would be your regulations, and the Act as the primary legislation doesn't have this requirement. So empowerment is not part of the requirements of the renewal of the mining right, which then the Mining Charter and the Act are then inconsistent. Disposal of empowerment shareholding. So the empowerment credentials of a holder will be recognized for the duration of the mining right if the right holder is compliant with the 2018 Mining Charter itself, or the B shares must have been held for a period equivalent to a third of the duration of the mining right. And the unencumbered net value must have been realized. And I mean, this has been included in the Mining Charter because if you look at the mining industry, you have empowerment structures where the empowerment partners are part of this mining company, but there are really no benefits because most of these transactions happened on vendor financing. And so if a mining right is granted for 20 years, and the first 15 years, if you're lucky, because I've seen empowerment transactions where even after 20 years, the empowerment partners haven't derived value. They're still just paying for the shares, for the 26% stake in the mining company, which defeats the purpose of transformation or empowerment in this regard. So the recognition of empowerment credentials shall only be applicable to the measured effective ownership which has vested to the empowerment shareholders. And if the empowerment shareholders wish to then exit the structure, then an exit agreement is to be submitted to the regulator. And we didn't have this before. So this is a new 2018 Mining Charter requirement. For pending applications, so applications which were lodged and accepted before the Mining Charter came into place in September, all those applications will have, so those mining companies that have made those applications will have 5 years within which to top up from 26% to 30%. And with the new mining rights, so we've dealt with existing, we've dealt with the pending applications, and new mining rights. So all these are the mining rights which would have been granted after 27 September 2018. And there the law is clear. It says a minimum of 30% of the empowerment shareholding should be distributed where you have a minimum of 5% non-transferable carried interest to qualifying employees, and another one for communities. And it says a minimum of 20% effective ownership, in which 5% of it should be for women, and the BE entrepreneur shareholding shall not be diluted below 51% ownership or control. So carried interest means shares issued at no cost and free of any encumbrance. And this is one of the new requirements in the 2018 Mining Charter that left the mining industry not very happy, because they still have to make up the 10%. And we know that mining is capital intensive. So, you know, when you start a mine, you only see the returns once you're in the production stage. And I suppose some of the mining companies' argument was that we don't have that money to have this 10% free carry. If they're going to financial institutions to raise funds, they will then need this 10% that's free carry to the employees and the community, and no dilution of the shares issued to the employees and communities. Okay, go here. So it says where the BE shareholding is concluded at any level other than the mining right level, the flow through principle will apply. So this just basically means you have the mining company that holds the mining right directly. Sometimes you have other entities, which we called grandfather transactions, where they hold the majority of the mining right holder. And if that's the case, there will be a flow through principle looking at the grandfather going down with the different entities up to the level of the mining right holder. The trust or similar vehicles shall be responsible for developing and implementing a host community development program. And the host community development program does not replace the social and labor plan commitments of the mining right holder. So this is over and above the SLP requirements. And when it comes to employment equity, if we look at the 2010 mining charter, it just had a minimum of 40% HDSA representation at all levels. And when I talk about levels, I'm talking about board level, the executive level, senior management, middle, junior. And the 2018 mining charter is quite refreshing in that it says the board, with all voting rights, 50% of the board must be historically disadvantaged persons, and 20% of that must be women. And for executive management as well, for senior management and middle management, it says 60% of those people must be historically disadvantaged persons, and 25% of that 60% must be women. And in the junior management levels, it's 70%, and 30% of that must be women. And there's a minimum that 1.5% of all employees must be employees with disabilities. So as you can see, this is the we're going the right way in trying to transform the mining industry. On procurement, the 2010 mining charter for capital goods and consumer goods, it basically said 40% for capital goods, 50% for consumer goods. The 2018 mining charter says 70% of the total mining goods procurement spend must be on South African manufactured goods. And it says 20% of that must be spent on South African manufactured goods by historically disadvantaged persons, and 5% must be spent on South African manufactured goods by a woman or youth-owned and controlled company, and 44% of the total mining goods must be done by South African manufactured goods by a B compliant company. And I've just explained there that it must be a minimum of BE level 4 on the DTI codes and have a 26% shareholding. The procurement of goods, the time frame for this is 5 years. So within 5 years, mining companies are supposed to align that their procurement of goods are within the target. And a 5-year plan had to be submitted to the DMR within 6 months from the date that was communicated by the regulator. And 70% of the total goods, the target, so 10% in the first year, 20% in the second year, 35% in the third year, and then 50% on the fourth year. And within 5 years, you must have met your 70%. And procurement on services. So the 2010 mining charter referred to 70% from BEE entities. In the 2018 mining charter, it's 80% of total spent on services must be sourced from South African companies, with 50% on supplied by HDPs, 15% supplied by women and controlled companies, 5% by the youth, and the youth is between the ages of 18 to 35, so I missed that boat. And then, or juristic person managed and controlled by HDP company. 10% must be spent on services supplied by BEE compliant company. 5 years as well to align for services, and in the first year you must be there 70%, and the second year 80%. So that's the 2018 mining charter, very high level. But if we look at the challenges that the mining industry has been experiencing over the years, I think they include that just the overall transformation of the mining industry remains very low. And if you look at the preamble of the 2018 mining charter, the government is aware, and it also articulates this, that we haven't seen that there is progress, definitely gains have been made, but it is not sufficient. And lack of institutional capacity, so experience with failed empowerment transaction indicates that the DMRE does not have the capacity to substantially assess an empowerment transaction and to determine whether transaction leads to meaningful participation or not. And to be fair, at that time, you just have agreements, empowerment agreements, and everyone has signed. So the DMRE will take it that, the empowerment partners have been advised and they know what they're getting themselves into. The other problem is the fronting practices by the mining companies. So you have empowerment transactions concluded. They allow the mining companies to control all the mining assets, operate them, and make money from them without ever declaring dividends. Or you have the DMRE does not have authority to investigate such practices or take remedial measures against mining houses that perpetuate fronting practices. But the good news is that the BEE Commission has been very, they've made a lot of progress. I think even when you go to their website, you can see what matters have been investigated, and hopefully, just generally in the economy, companies will stop the fronting practices and really commit to true empowerment. The other challenge is the trickle flow of benefits, which was sought to service the debt and to provide cash flow directly to the empowerment partners, which has been found to be inadequate. And this happens when you have a vendor finance transaction, and the trickle dividend, it's supposed to empower the empowerment partners while the life of mine is happening, not at the end. So during the mining operations, that's when you want the empowerment partners to benefit. The focus of the transfer of ownership has largely been on empowering a few individuals and very little about communities, workers, or industry. So you would have seen, especially when it started, all the big mining transactions would go to the usual suspects, as they call them in the industry. And when you look at the majority of mining communities continue to live in poverty, and the finance required for the historically disadvantaged person they need to acquire equity and is often obtained from vendor finance loans, and these loans are expected to be repaid from dividend returns. Although upfront capital is not required from these partners, the compromise is that they only derive the full value of the share ownership only once the debt tied to the shares is fully repaid, which defeats the purpose. Because if it's 30-year operation and you're only going to get your first dividend after 20 years, it's not the true spirit of empowerment. Another challenge is the regulatory burden. So this whole growing regulatory burden on, the fact that the MPRDA does not provide for the development of further charters, and the regulator and the Minerals Council taking each other to court, that has really slowed the progress of transformation in the mining industry, because mining companies are waiting to see, so is it going to be law? Is it applicable? Are we going to court? Are they, are the laws going to change? And remember, mining companies have shareholders, and once you have certainty, then it's easier to operate your mining operations. I've said, so sometimes empowerment partners are given shares but no voting rights, which is not true empowerment, or there are no identifiable beneficiaries. And males still dominate the strategic positions in the mining industry. I think we're heading in the right direction. I think the last time I checked, we're about 12% women, which is still quite low, but from where we come from, I think the mining industry is making tracks. So progress made, major mining companies met the empowerment targets, leading to the rise to prominence of Black mining enterprises such as African Rainbow Minerals, Makau Mining, and really the mining charter has increased the ownership threshold from 26% to 30%, and it aims to facilitate and integrate the local population into the mainstream mining economy by setting targets for supply of goods and services to mining companies. And this really assists in the mining operations, where the communities can be the service providers for the mining companies. And I think the mining charter deals with that quite well. So I looked at the Mining Industry Transformation Progress Report published by the Minerals Council, and they had Moshe Capital to conduct a survey. This looked at the 2018 Mining Charter Compliance Report, and it had 32 member companies as submitted to the DMRE in March 2019. So that's the data that was used. And I will just go to the next slide. So if you look at that, on ownership, 39.2% of the mining companies are there, and effective ownership, where there's meaningful economic participation, it was 23.7%. And when you look at the employment equity, top management 58%, senior 52%, middle management 61%, junior management 70%, core and critical skills 78%, capital goods 75%, services 75%, consumable goods 79%. And that's just the capital, that's a procurement value of 1.4. And the human resources development, mine community development, 5% of annual payroll, in skills development, 4.8. And on community consultation and collaboration, that was 89%. And then I just took the slide, which just shows, it was a 2018 sample, which shows the gender and race representation in the survey. And they found that females are underrepresented across all management categories, as you can see on the slide. And you'll see there that males still dominate the strategic positions. So top 38% and senior management of 47%. I have said a mouthful. I'm now going to pause and take questions.
Thank you so much, Ntsiki. That was a brilliant overview of where we're standing right now and kind of the accumulated changes in the law, which has been quite fascinating, quite a saga. We do have a question from the floor from Mike Woodhall. We have, do you envision the South African manufactured goods to be tracked? How do you envision them to be tracked and verified?
Yes, so part, and I suppose I didn't address it, in the charter, I'll just look to it, but you have to be sub-approved. And I suppose that's, let me just find it. But there was also, while I'm looking for this, I'll come back to it. But the biggest issue with the manufactured goods was, the industry kind of said, South Africa doesn't have those readily available, but it's a place where we can get to in time. And most of these machinery comes from offshore or are provided by offshore companies. So it's a really good question, but I know that it has to be approved to say this is South African. And my understanding from speaking to different people is that you have parts that can be locally manufactured, but the entire, when it's all put together, when the machinery is all put together, the other parts will definitely not be South African manufactured goods. You are on mute.
Sorry about that. We've got a comment from Paul Jordan, which is the SABS certified local content. I think that's, yeah. So
that's what, yes, that's exactly it.
So I just I have a few questions. And one is whether the various charters are cumulative. Do they kind of feed off one another, or once we have the 2010 that disregards the original kind of mandate, and then 2018, the 2018 charter, does it build upon the previous charters?
So the 2018 mining charter specifically says it then repeals all the other charters. So 2018 is the charter.
Okay, so they don't necessarily feed into one another.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at it, the mining companies that structured their deals in the 2004 mining charter would have been the ones that are in the category of once empowered, always empowered, where they either used shares or units of production or sold off their assets to empowerment partners. And that's why it was so important for the mining industry, this once empowered, always empowered, to say that has happened, or the empowerment partners have now exited. Now you can't say the 2018 mining charter for those mining companies they now don't comply with, which is why the 2018 mining charter says for existing mining rights, you'll be deemed to be compliant for the duration of your mining right.
Okay, thank you. We have a hand up from Paul. Do you want to take the stage, so to speak? Okay, there we go. He's coming.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
yes, Paul, we can hear you.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you. Just a point you didn't mention, there was a big problem with procurement fronting in the 2010 charter. because it
Sure.
just said you had to buy from a BE company who could be supplying products from Sweden or Japan or from China.
Correct.
So that, and NUMSA actually showed how that disempowered over, in one case, over 100 workers who lost their jobs because now the electrical cabling was imported instead of being bought from South African companies.
Yes.
The other issue that's very important now that the supply, initially the supply chain wasn't there. Way back in 2002, we tried to get it in the objectives about developing the supply chain, but
Sure.
we didn't succeed. But it has come in, and that's great, 20 years late, but because we really believe that's where transformation is.
Sure.
Mining, you're always just left with a groot gat, a hole in the ground like Kimberley, or
Sure.
like Merafong, or wherever, Stilfontein, Kabwe, Mangura. Southern Africa is littered with ghost towns.
Sure.
However, in the supply chain, those are ongoing. So you have companies in the supply chain that have been going for 150 years. They are sustainable. So we
Sure.
think that's really important that the 2018 now looks that it's got to be South African manufactured. And the
Sure.
other point I wanted to finally make was DTIC are meant to come up with a common coding classification system. And if underlined, if we move to something like the UN SBSC, the kind of barcoding, then the whole verification becomes very easy because the company will already have, as all their inputs will be coded, are they South African or foreign? And then now outputs are coded. So ultimately, a long way away, when the whole supply chain is coded, you don't even need SABs to certify local content because you can track it. You'll see what the company supplying spent on imports and what their suppliers spent on imports and what level tier 3 spent and what tier 4 spent, and you'll be able to track the whole chain. But that's that's a bit of a nirvana. I'm not sure we'll ever get there. However, our supermarkets have got there. So there's, I know that the mining industry aren't as smart and quick as supermarkets, but they may get there sometime.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like I said, there has been progress, but it could get better. Agreed. And I think if we collaborate as stakeholders, we'll get there. I mean, just with this, the 2018 mining charter, the workshops of the task team that took place with the industry, I think it was a better consultation. The consultation was better than the previous, the 2010 mining charter or the 2017 mining charter. So I think there's progress.
Agreed.
Yeah, there's definitely progress. We're heading in the right direction.
So we had Paul on the forum a few months ago now. Feels like we started this forum online like just the other day. But so thank you so much, Paul, for being here and contributing. We've got another question from the attendees, from Terry. How does the South African mining industry transformation efforts compare to those of mining companies internationally?
How does
the South African mining industry transformation efforts compare to those mining companies, to other mining companies?
And other mining companies out of our jurisdiction. So as you know, South Africa is very unique because not all countries went through apartheid. So we have our legislation is geared towards dealing with the past injustices. And that's why we're a bit unique. And I say this, as you know, as ENS, we have what's the word? Offices in other jurisdictions, and they don't have this empowerment empowerment issue, what they deal with is local content. So if you look at the, I'll just call it international or African mining industry, they're also, their battles are different. So it could be infrastructure or local content you want to, the host communities. So I think we have similar issues there on trying to empower the people on the grassroots where mining operations take place. And I think that's a global issue.
Yeah, I guess that touches on what we mean specifically about what transformation actually is in our context. So
yes,
it's transforming.
And sorry, Aysha.
No, go for it.
No. I was saying, and you would have seen even the way the mining charters are drafted. They can assess the South African situation and put it in those where they say, we'll look at ownership. We think ownership will, assist in transforming the mining industry. They also looked at what else. So it'd be procurement. Procurement will help because now you'll have local industries where we don't have to go out, but we get our services and goods locally. We're not there yet. Some is happening. And I'm not talking about mining companies saying, oh, here's an empowerment company, come supply us with tissue paper. I'm talking about proper machinery, proper services, and I've seen, if I look at the different mining companies, you have ones that are just, it's a tick box exercise. They just want to say, yeah, we comply with the scorecard and move on. But you have mining companies who are deliberate. And I think most of my clients, they're deliberate, they want to see a change, they really want to empower. And you will see it in the people that they procure for. For instance, we have clients, when they come to me, they have to report to the regulator that I used a Black female at a law firm because I'm providing a service. And you have clients who are deliberate about that to say, we need more. We're going to give you this big matter, but we want to make sure that the historically disadvantaged people are being exposed to these matters. I'm just giving it as an example. But mining companies are doing that. They will go and source material from the smaller junior miners to say, let's JV, or you give us your aggregate, or, so there is some form of commitment that I've been seeing, or to say, we're not going to use these gold dams. You can go ahead and apply for the environmental authorizations and mine, giving it to HDSAs to start their own small mining company. So there are different ways of transformation, I suppose, in getting the mining industry on the right path of true transformation. But I think it's going to take time.
So I've just got a few questions that I would love your input on. So what are some of the major kind of existing players that fall, well, are kind of exempt because of this misalignment between the MPRDA and the mining charters? So these existing players, what do we have?
When you say existing players, Aysha? Are you saying what mining companies are doing what? I just didn't get, yeah?
So mining companies that have existing rights and because of this misalignment between the MPRDA and the mining charter, do they become exempt because of that misalignment, that they don't necessarily have to abide by the kind of transformational vision of the mining charter?
No.
Okay.
No. Existing mining right holders are bound by the same laws. Nothing is different for them.
Okay.
All the mining charter is saying is you will be deemed to be compliant. So when I say existing, so I shouldn't make examples here. So let's say a big mining company then sold off to its empowerment partners, right? And the empowerment partners either run with the mining ops, or the empowerment partners exit. So they work well, they make their money, they take it and they go and find their own mining operations. You can't say that mining company didn't empower anyone, because you can track it. They empowered this set of individuals. These individuals took that money and started their own operations. You can track it. So you can't say once empowered, always empowered won't apply to those mining companies. But they are governed by the same primary legislation, the MPRDA and the 2018 Mining Charter, and have to meet all the other requirements except for ownership. Because remember, ownership is one level it's one of the elements of the mining charter. So you would have ticked one box just on ownership, but you have to procurement, your board still has to have 50% Black people, 20% women, must be women. And remember, you're given 5 years to get there. So the mining industry realizes that it's not an overnight thing, but if you look at how the SLP is also positioned when it comes to human resources, it's that you need to track individuals, employees, to say, move from being a junior, from junior management to get you to medium, and you kind of track their what's not promotion, but yes, to track their progress in the mining, and you get that's part of the scorecard for empowerment, to say you've groomed this person who started off as an admin clerk or whatever. They're now a geologist, which is why for social and labor plan, they'll look at things like bursaries, training, transfer of skills, and that's transformation. That's the true sense. And I think some mining companies do it really well and some don't. So we just need to get the ones that aren't doing enough to commit and do it better. And you have 5 years, you have a plan, so you can make it work if you're committed to it.
Yeah. So we're nearing the end. We're at the 3 o'clock mark. But we've had last week's session based on human rights and extending and trying to understand the abuses in the mining sector and how we can try and transform and change. And now we've had this transformation seminar that I really appreciate. Thank you so much for giving us more of an in-depth view around the legal kind of pressure that's being put behind this mandate. And then next week we have the kind of discussion around ensuring vehicles for growth and how do we encourage transformation through certain kind of economic distribution. So whether there's communities that have communal land, and how do we make sure that that land is kept secure and all of the benefits that accrue from that land is given to communities. So I guess this is it's a very broad question, and it's complex, and it will be spoken about for an entire hour in and of itself. But from a personal experience, from your personal experience in terms of a vehicle for growth, would you say that holding a community land in trust is quite a useful thing to do, or would you say community requires more of an more support from the mining industry in terms of, I don't know, furthering their economic interests?
So this is, and people don't usually agree with me. So for communities, it depends on what kind of community it is. So our legislation says, makes provision to help communities who want to mine. So they can go to the regulator and say, we have resources, we would like to mine, and they either establish themselves as a company and they form a community trust that holds shares into that entity, or they say, we are the landowners and you're mining on our area, and for that, they either agree to rental income, or they agree on a royalty to say, for every ton of whatever commodity you mine, we get payment, right? And I find that communities in themselves, if they are properly constituted and they are aligned in what they want, then that can work. But I have seen very few community trusts that work, because they're not aligned. So there'll be infighting. Then you have to change the trustees. Then people are not aligned on what they want. And for instance, if you gave 20 million to a community trust and said, here's money for the entire community, and this is one of the challenges I spoke about earlier, on the difficulty in identifying the beneficiaries. So there's a community, right? And there'll be, let's say they listed, but if you had to give cash to each individual beneficiary, it wouldn't have the same impact than it would if you took the 20 million and built a university in that community, or taken that and said, okay, we've upskilled, we as a community are going to mine ourselves, and learning. I mean, it's a business. So if you have people who can run the business, it can also work. But I find that the community trust, however they what's the word, establish themselves, if they have the common goal, then it works perfectly. Yeah.
Creating a kind of a like-minded vision is very necessary.
Yeah, because if as a community you come together and you say, we're going to mine this, we're going to do these things ourselves, it can work.
Yeah, and also just entrusting certain key kind of
yeah, I think it gets
I
also think it gets complex depending on how, is there tribal authority there, what are the dynamics. So each one will be different. I mean, I know one where you had, I just won't mention names, so you had the community that came and said, but we came to this mining company and said, we're not happy because you've built this amazing clinic, but you put it in one area, not the other. What decision did you take to build this clinic? And it's, you speak to the municipality and they've got different ward councillors. And if, like I said, if people are not aligned, and where they wanted it, there was already a residential property development that was going to take place. And, the municipality said, well, we don't have that area, put it on the next area. But you think communities would be happy to see, infrastructure coming up in the community, but it's also havoc because why is it in area A and not area B? But if they were all aligned, then, you'd say, as a community, we think building a university on area A will benefit the entire community.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do think that Yeah, I completely agree with you that there needs to be an alignment, and we need to workshop the kinds of community governance structures that we have, and then ensure that local government plays a strong role and support local government as much as we possibly can in facilitating conversation and in pursuing development goals within their area, because after all, they are the ones closest to the context that they're trying to impact. So
yes,
yeah, so I would thank you so much. Just thank you so much for your presentation and your time, and I hope, you know, to see you back soon, because I think that this topic has a lot of avenues that we can explore, and it'll just get richer the more we look into it. So yeah, have a lovely afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us today, and I will see you all next week, same time, same place.
Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.